I'm going to ask Ben Bradshaw, who, Ben, I think you've been an MP since '97, which predates even the Archbishop's Council, but you were Secretary of State for Culture and Media and Sport under Gordon Brown, but then went on to the Ecclesiastical Committee in, I think, about 2010, so has seen various measures through the House. And I'm very grateful you've come to sort of share a bit about your experiences there, and perhaps also about some of what happened in our meeting last week with cross-party MPs. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I'm not going to speak for very long because Tony has already said much better than I possibly could what I was going to say, but I did preach about this at Merton College in Oxford on Sunday evening, and that sermon is still online if you want to have got time for a viewing or a listening afterwards. But it's got so much repetition of Tony's words just now that I'm just going to say a few words about why this matters to many MPs and parliamentarians. Because I get this question a lot, what's this got to do with Parliament? Well, Tony's already explained the fact that the Church of England is the creation of parliamentary statute and some of the history of the 1919 Act and some of the instances where the Church of England has found itself out of step with changing public attitudes, whether on divorce or on the role of women, the more recent one. And speaking for myself, I'm a practicing Anglican, as Jane says. For my sins, I volunteered to serve on the Ecclesiastical Committee, both when I was in opposition on the backbenches in the first Labour term after '97, but also since we've been in opposition since 2010. And the reason I think that parliamentarians are engaged in this, whether they are practicing Anglicans or even Christians, is because the interaction that we have in our constituencies on a daily, if not weekly basis, forces us, whether we like it or not, to engage with the established church. And so MPs, perhaps more than general members of the public, have, I do think, some understanding of this peculiar constitutional relationship that we have, but not just at the parliamentary and the legal level, but also at the community level. I'd never really thought about establishment very much, although my father was a priest growing up, until I was an MP. When there is a terrible tragedy in my constituency, or when there's some great cause for community celebration, it's the cathedral or the parish church that opens its doors to the community. Any one of my constituents feels they can call on the Church of England if they want to, because the church is an established church and it has a duty to serve all. And I think the thing that is exercising my parliamentary colleagues at the moment, and some of you may have seen the urgent question a couple of weeks ago, which I secured on this, and there was a considerable amount of interest from across the House on this, is how compatible my colleagues feel it is in the long term for a church to retain its established status, which is something that I think the vast majority of my colleagues in the Commons and Lords greatly value, and the prospect of disentangling hundreds of years of history and everything that would involve fills them with horror, but also because they really appreciate and value that relationship at local level that they have with their Church of England in particular, and the role that the Church of England often plays in speaking for all the faiths, as indeed they do in the House of Lords. So they feel troubled, and I wouldn't put it any more strongly than that at the moment. They feel troubled at the prospect of this chasm, if you like, this chasm between church and parliament carrying on for very much longer. It's already, I think, in the views of many of my colleagues, gone on for too long. We've had this very long process inside the church of discussion. And I think there was a sense that when the bishops came out with their statement, that this fell somewhat short of what parliamentarians had been hoping for. So I'm not suggesting or even saying that there's a chance that Parliament is going to go nuclear on this and repeal the 1919 Act. I mean, for heaven's sake, we've got enough to do without having to take on responsibility for all of the Church of England legislation, which we used to do, and for very good reason we handed over. But I think there would be support for the sort of parliamentary initiative that Sir Tony has just outlined. It's not going to happen very quickly, not least because one of the All the slots for private members' bills this year have already been taken, so we have to wait for the next parliamentary session. But there are other legislative mechanisms and ways in which this could be revisited. So I want people and you as members of Synod to be conscious of the fact that I think Parliament is worried about this. Parliament values the role of the Church of England as an established church. It wants to nurture that relationship, but it's not prepared to do so at all costs, and particularly not at the costs of continuing to discriminate against people because they happen to be gay. I mean, I happen to be gay, I happen to be an Anglican, I happen to be in a marriage to my partner of 20, a monogamous, faithful marriage to my partner of 28 years. I'm sticking in the Church of England at the moment, but most of my family and friends have left. And it's often not, people often think, oh, well, LGBTQ plus people are distressed and feel rejected by this. It's actually often their families and their friends who feel that rejection more keenly and feel more angry about it. So, a bit like I stayed in the Labour Party and fought under Jeremy Corbyn, I'm staying in the church.